Hello there! I didn't see you come in. Please take a seat. I'm teaching a great lesson today. The first lesson is going to be on focus. Focus is when any image looks sharp and clear. Now, do you see how the image looks distorted and illegible? The distance between the optical center and the CCD is known as the focal length. Different focal lengths have different effects on the distance, speed, and size of objects and their surroundings. Short focal length or wide-angle lenses make objects between the foreground, midground, and background seem further apart than they actually are, speed up objects moving towards the camera, and keep the majority of the image in focus. Mid-focal length or normal lenses approximate normal human perspective in all ways. Objects move and appear on the screen as they would to the human eye. Long focal length crowd the background objects together, slow motion towards and away from the camera, and keep only the subject of interest in focus. To make sure an image is in focus, it's best to zoom in as much as possible. By zooming in on the eyes or eyebrows, the operator can focus clearly on the smallest detail. This process is called calibrating the focus. If the camera moves during production, the focus will need to be recalibrated, as the distance from the objects may change. Now that we're done with focus, we're going to move on to zoom. There are different kind of zoom lenses on different kind of cameras. First of all, studio cameras have specific lenses for studio use only. Secondly, field cameras have lenses that are used for mobile production. ENG and EFP cameras have interchangeable lenses and are considered consumer level. Lastly, lenses on small cameras, camcorders, or smartphone cannot be exchanged or replaced. Generally, field lenses have a greater zoom range than studio lenses because field cameras often have to cover a wider shot than average. Nevertheless, ENG and EFP lenses are much smaller than studio and field lenses because they must be interchangeable on small, portable cameras. Lastly, the zoom range on smartphones are the smallest because the space available to the lens is even smaller than EFP and ENG lenses. The next topic we're going to talk about is iris. Just like the human eye, lenses have technology in place to control the amount of light that enters it. The iris is a collection of metal blades that slide in and out to change the size of the aperture. The aperture is a hole in the center that allows light into the camera. The exposure of the image depends on the size of the aperture. Regardless of the type of camera or lens type, the f-stop is the standard scale for measuring aperture. F-stop is measured by focal length over the size of the opening of the aperture. The smaller the aperture, the larger the f-stop. Most lenses perform optimally between f5.6 and f8. The aperture can be adjusted by the iris control. Because exposure is so important, the video operator or the CCU must have full control of the camera iris. The exposure is set using the black and white chip chart to check that none of the image is over or underexposed. All the black and white squares should be a distinct color and none should bleed into each other. Many cameras can be switched to auto iris, and in some cases this mode may be more effective. For example, in outdoor shots, auto iris would prevent the shaded areas from being underexposed and bright areas from being overexposed. Now, to finish our exciting lecture, let's move on to the depth of field. Depth of field refers to the range of distance in which camera's sharp focus can be obtained. This is a very valuable technique to understand for two reasons. First, if the depth of field isn't controlled, then objects that are supposed to be in focus may slip out into a soft zone. Secondly, controlling the depth of field can open up a massive range of possibilities for creativity. Depth of field is determined by focal length, aperture, and distance from the camera. A general rule about focal length is that as focal length decreases, depth of field increases. As for aperture, the larger the f-stop, the greater the depth of field. And finally, the further an object is from the camera, the greater the depth of field. Finally, I've told you everything you need to know about lenses. Focus, zoom, iris, and depth of field. It's been a pleasure. Have a good day.